Morning. This is Tuesday, October 8, 2019. This is our regular Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting. We have several items on our agenda today. And under adjustments to the agenda, I'll mention we're going to be pulling item 6A3, and we'll be discussing that after we take up the
B3.
B3, excuse me, thank you. 6B3, we'll be taking that up after we do the rest of the consent calendar. Mr. Kyler has been alerted to that and knows that that is coming on the agenda. We have a probable morning executive session, which will be between 15 and 30 minutes toward the end of the morning. That may require us to bump item 6C, the census and redistricting, from this morning to the afternoon. Mr. Kincaid is alerted to be available both morning and afternoon, but it looks to me like we're going to be going into the afternoon, and so we'll probably take that up in the afternoon. Besides that 30 or 15 to 30 minute executive session, we will not be having two executive sessions. So we don't have any emergency business. We'll be taking up our employee recognition, search and rescue folks briefly after we finish these adjustments to the agenda. Are there any other adjustments, Mr. Milkreisky?
No.
Okay, any from board? Okay, so at this time we will say there is no emergency business, and we'll move to item number 3, our recognition. And why don't we have the folks being recognized come up, and Mr. Milkreisky, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and come on up here and sit at the table. We won't make you stand in front of the board. And Chief Deputy, do you want to join us as well? Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and today we're really pleased to recognize our search and rescue team, Search and Rescue Supervisor Tim Chase from the Lane County Sheriff's Office, and our radio and network technician Brian Grieg from the Sheriff's Office. So Tim and Brian received the 2019 Commitment to Excellence Award from APCO NENA, which is a public safety communications organization in the Oregon chapter here on September 11th, 2019. APCO NENA Oregon works to advance public safety communications across the state, and this is again an example of something that we don't always see or recognize until it's broken. And when we're in the event of an emergency, public safety officials throughout the county rely on these critical communication systems to function, to serve the needs, to respond to emergencies that are happening throughout the community. This award was made in recognition of their incredible efforts to keep emergency radio communications going during the snowstorm earlier this year. So again, these are critical communications, and then we have a major event. We saw a number of these between the snowstorm, the flooding events, the fire then that happened. It was the trifecta earlier this year of weather events. And the ability of our first responders to communicate with one another is critical in an emergency. During the snowstorm, we lost the ability to communicate in the McKenzie Bridge area and in South Lane County, something that Commissioner Buck is familiar with, as she fielded a lot of those calls from residents and officials in those areas worried about the response by public safety officials and the response to residents there. Tim and Brian took the lead in coordinating fuel deliveries under extremely difficult circumstances and the repairs to the affected communication towers. So we wanted to bring Tim and Brian here today to, again, they do incredible work. Our search and rescue team is really, sometimes it's a hidden gem, and we recognize their work only when really terrible things happen to folks in our community, and we're so thankful that we have this team to serve our community. I want to also note that Dennis Alexander from Central Lane Communications was also recognized along with Tim and Brian, for his work with them. All three were nominated for this award by Central Lane 911 Supervisor Pam Collette, and so it's our pleasure to recognize them for this distinguished award and thank them for the great work that they do all day, every day to improve lives and keep our residents safe in Lane County. And Chief Deputy, I want to ask if you have anything that you'd like to add to that.
Thanks, Dave. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to recognize two of our unsung heroes. These two gentlemen are some of the hardest working and best performing employees we have. And as Steve already said, they don't get the recognition until things bad happen. But almost every day they're getting the phone calls in the middle of the night to fix problems so that the rest of my team can do their job. During the snow event, these guys literally were the front line on keeping calls of service moving, and they did it with a smile on their face like they do every day. And they worked tirelessly around the clock for days just trying to keep our communication system in place. And it's not unusual for them to both perform like that. And like I said, they're just two unsung heroes who aren't seeking any kind of credit. In fact, they probably aren't enjoying sitting up here right now. But they are the embodiment of the men and women who work at the Sheriff's Office, and we couldn't be more proud of them. So thank you for this opportunity to recognize their achievements.
Mr. Chair, we have a brief video that we'd like to show, and I'll ask Devin to cue that up to give you sort of you oftentimes hear us tell you the great work that our employees do, but it's another thing to actually see and I think in this case in particular, to see the challenges that they face. So we'll roll this to give you an idea of.
I think it'd probably actually be better to let Tim or Brian describe what's going on here.
So this is a roadway up to the Bear Mountain radio repeater site, and it had been buried in snow. The site had no power, and we were using this Argo, which is a tracked snow vehicle that we were able to purchase with some Title III money last year to get to the site. And basically we were bringing up propane canisters that Brian did to work with some other vendors. We could basically power a propane generator with a large installed tank using those small portable tanks, and they had all run dry, and we were up there on getting them more installed while we waited for power from to be restored to the site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And I know Commissioner Buck yesterday went to the Oregon Emergency Management Association. I was just there briefly this morning, and the theme really was, at least from us, was how much energy went into that emergency. $17 million worth of public infrastructure damaged in that snow event. And at least I was provided by Patience Winningham that two of those towers were down. Is this one of the towers? Yeah, so two of the towers. What was the other one?
Well, so there was, throughout the course of the storm, there were several towers, a lot of stuff up in the McKenzie area. I believe it's
Hagen was the other.
Hagen, and then Oak Ridge lost a tower up there. Bear Mountain, through Brian's efforts and Dennis's efforts at LCC and the work that I believe Bear never actually lost.
We were down maybe for a matter of hours in between when we lost the site at one point in the middle of the night. It just wasn't safe at all to go up. But yeah, it was not down like a couple days like some of the other sites in the area were.
Mm-hmm. Well, at any rate, we really appreciate your efforts and appreciate the opportunity to take a moment to recognize you. Commissioner Buck.
I want to say thank you for your work. I heard the stories of the conditions up there that you were working in, and I know that you probably have families at home that also needed your attention at that time. Thank them as well for freeing you up to be able to help the community in that way. They really, the residents really appreciate it, and they recognized it, and they did give me feedback about that, and it's so nice to see in person who were the folks that were doing that good work. So you are appreciated.
Okay. Other commissioners? Commissioner Burney?
Having lived in 1989, 6 miles from the epicenter of a 7.1 earthquake and learning on the ground what happens, I just want to say that in real life and death events, be they climate or natural disasters or what have you, I think that the work you guys do is far more important at that moment than the work we do. I think that you and everyone you work with and everyone in those communities that was working with you or just working to survive are all unsung heroes. And I think through this recognition of you, we recognize really everybody that contributes to those situations. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. Commissioner Farr?
Tim, it's good to see you. I'm glad that I didn't wait for this moment to thank you. Each time I pass you in the hallway, I try to say thank you because it really is ongoing. And I mentioned to the chief a few minutes ago that I envy your work, and the chief said to me, and it was very serious, he said, you wouldn't at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is when Tim's phone rings. Well, absolutely. You're there on call at times when most of us are just resting safely in bed. Thanks for being there, man. It's an amazing thing.
And I'll just echo everybody's thanks. This particular event was an incredible event. I understand at one of the repeater sites, you guys just stepped over a 6-foot fence because the snow was that deep, and you had to actually dig down to find the propane tank, before you could actually refill it. So, that's kind of the magnitude of the event that you guys were dealing with. But you guys deal with so much all the time. It's just nice to have you up here to thank you. I understand this last Labor Day weekend was kind of busy for you guys.
Yep.
People don't realize holiday weekends, for all of us are a holiday weekend. For search and rescue, it's like prime time. I think you guys had 6 or 7 call outs for searches that weekend in various parts of the county. When we are all relaxing and having a campfire or at a labor picnic, you guys are tromping around in the woods somewhere looking for somebody that got lost. So we really appreciate the work you do. You don't get recognized enough, and it's just nice that this gives us an opportunity to say thank you.
So thank you very much. Appreciate it. It wasn't that painful, was it? Okay, good. All right. Good. Thank you. So next up is public comment, and we have a few people signed up. So Ashley Fraser can come forward while I'm reading this or telling you a little bit about this. We're going to have public comment. Everybody that signed up should get 3 minutes. When you come up to the microphone, you'll see there's 3 kind of colored buttons there. The green means that you are supposed to start talking. The yellow means you have 30 seconds, and red means stop talking. So with that, we'll ask our vice chair to have Ms. Fraser come up to the microphone and introduce yourself. And as soon as you introduce yourself and tell us where you live, she will start the timer and you'll get your 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Ashley Fraser. I live in Lane County here in Eugene. I work in emergence addiction and behavioral therapies just down the street as a certified alcohol and drug counselor. I'm also an advocacy committee member for Oregon Recovers. I would like to thank the Board of Commissioners for taking the time to address the addiction crisis that affects all of us here in Lane County, and for your continued work on the resolution that declares addiction a public health crisis. We would especially like to thank Government Relations Staff Alex Kyler for his hard work on the resolution drafting process. His attention and commitment to this is greatly appreciated. As this resolution is on the consent calendar for today, it is our hope that we will be able to thank you and celebrate with you the passing of this resolution so that we can show the communities of Lane County that addressing addiction as a public health crisis matters to our elected officials. We expect the Eugene City Council to adopt a similar resolution this month also, and I remain committed to being a community advocate with Oregon Recovers to ensure that this issue continues receiving the attention it deserves. National Recovery Month just ended, and it saw communities of people across the state speaking out about addiction and recovery, joining hands in unity to bring light to this crisis, and sharing their stories of addiction and recovery, and pleading for help in offering life-saving access to treatment and ongoing recovery support services statewide. Currently at Emergence, we have several highly motivated individuals who have been on a residential waiting list for several months, and that is just simply not okay. The work that Lane County Board of Commissioners is doing to help address the addiction crisis in this community is vital, imperative, and will need to be continuous. Statistics show that people who reach 5 years of sustained recovery have significantly reduced rates of relapse, so our commitment to this issue needs to start here and move forward. It is our hope that you will continue to walk alongside of us and urge our state legislators to take action now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Terry Morgan, followed by Dave Piccioni, followed by Deborah Daly.
Hello. My name is Terry Morgan, and I live in Springfield. I am the program coordinator of Springfield Treatment Center and an executive steering committee member of Oregon Recovers. I would like to thank the Board of Commissioners for their time, focus, and energy around addressing the addiction crisis in Lane County and the state of Oregon, which ranks 50th in the nation for access to treatment while having the 4th highest addiction rate in the nation. Standing here today, knowing that the resolution we presented to acknowledge that addiction is a rampant public health crisis is getting attention, it gives me hope, strength, and renewed faith that our community is invested in addressing this issue. Oregon sees more than 2,100 deaths a year due to addiction, and I am here to speak for those people who lost their battle to this disease. I am also here to remind you that those numbers are minuscule compared to the actual numbers of people who are struggling with active addiction to alcohol and drugs at this moment in this community. People who are suffering because our system is fractured and incomplete, and we have limited access to treatment and services which support ongoing recovery. Tomorrow, I will be speaking about addiction, prevention, and recovery at Sheldon High School, and I will ask 2 classes of 30 to 40 teenage students this question: who in here knows someone whose life has been affected by drugs or alcohol? Each time I have presented this, nearly every hand of every child in the room goes up. Addiction is pervasive, chronic, and it touches everyone in this community. Governor Brown's recent announcement that she does not plan on taking immediate action on this critical issue is mind-boggling, especially since it contradicts her executive order and declaration that addiction is a public health crisis. And I want to share my gratitude to you for continuing to acknowledge that this crisis is an important issue that needs attention, action, and voices. I would like to encourage you to include language that declares this public health crisis, as 7 Oregonians die each day, and Lane County has one of the highest addiction rates for methamphetamine use in the nation. We as a community cannot continue to turn away from the prevalent and constant issues and side effects that active addiction cause in our neighborhoods, places of business, schools, hospitals, and corrections agencies. I want to encourage you to reach out to the governor and advise against delaying action in this matter. 6.5 years ago, I was a homeless drug addict, actively committing crimes to support my drug habit. Estranged from my family and so sick and malnourished that I could barely function. I had to fight for a spot in residential treatment. I had to fight for a place to live when I completed treatment. I had to fight to have my daughter returned from foster care, and I am still fighting today to repair the damage from my active drug use. I will not give up, and I will continue to build a beautiful life in recovery. We need to offer this opportunity to everyone. We must take action now and stand together to make change happen, because we do recover. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dave Piccioni, Deborah Daly, and Stacy Yates. So welcome, Dave.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. My name's Dave Piccioni. I live in Eugene. I think I've made it clear that I support legalization of all drugs. I support people being taught people learning and people practicing self-healing, not just with drugs, but a part of some of it is the drugs too. It shouldn't be seen as a crime. It should be seen as either a spiritual seeking effort or just an addiction that doesn't have an explanation. What I really wanted to talk about today, but this changed my subject about the addiction, is the Euglena viridis. When I was a kid, I had a microscope. It was brand Tasco. It was really good. It was 600 power, 600 times X, and there was this one-celled organism that I learned to love, and it's so beautiful. It's the Euglena viridis, and the word viridis comes from either Latin or Greek, and it means green. This one-celled organism had a flagella, kind of like a sperm cell. It has a little thing behind it, tells it move around. And the reason it was green is because it had chloroplasts, which is what plants have, where the chlorophyll is. So this one-celled organism could eat bacteria as its source of food, but when there was no food, it could do photosynthesis and nourish itself that way. I think that's an amazing evidence of how the circle goes round and round. We got these very primitive one-celled protozoans, and we got us, there are people in the world that have sunlight, but they don't have green energy-producing chloroplasts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deborah Daly and Stacy Yates.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Daly, and I'm from the Eugene Forte School District. I'm an advocate for homeless students in the district. And Stacy, we're a team today. Stacy Yates.
Hi, good morning. My name is Stacy Yates. I live in Springfield. I participate in the Lane County Poverty and Homeless Board by working with the Homeless Youth Solutions Work Group.
I also do, and I'm from Eugene. Go ahead, Stacy.
Okay. I want to thank Pat Farr for being a ever-present member at the Lane County Poverty and Homeless Board and for all your tireless work. We're here today to talk about a presentation that we gave to the board, specifically regarding a gap in our service delivery system that was identified with data and the point-in-time count. What the point-in-time count identified, in that night in January, there were 119 unsheltered young people between the ages of 18 and 24. I understand that you're in the process now of speaking about winter strategies with different service providers. Excuse me, I hate public speaking. The request that our work group brought to the Lane County Poverty and Homeless Board was to consider developing a developmentally appropriate, age-appropriate shelter, low-barrier option for young people between the ages of 24. You might ask, why should there be a special shelter set aside for this age group? And the reason being is that young people in this age group have access to a lot of current resources within the school district, the workforce board, and behavioral health care services. But if they are unable to find a place to sleep and unable to plug in their cell phones and get enough food to eat, they are unable to take advantage of those resources to make changes in their lives. A shelter setting like this would not just be a roof over their head, it would be a place where outreach workers could come to, school district employees, other behavioral health care workers, public health care workers could come and do intensive targeting to this age group to hopefully divert them from long-term homelessness and get them on the road to recovery and to a clear path for long-term stability.
Great. I just want to follow up with an experience I had just on Thursday. I met a student that attends Churchill at school. He slept under the Washington Jefferson Street Bridge the night before. He sleeps out every night. And I will say he gets to school on time, and he's pretty well put together, and everything's tucked in. He had a court hearing for trespassing as he plugged in his phone to have it charged in a non-public place. And so granted, that was something he needed to deal with, but the point is, if he had a shelter, if he had a place to plug in his phone, these things would not be happening. I wouldn't be driving someone to a municipal court. He was scared to death. He was scared to death to sleep under the Washington Street Bridge the night before. And, no breakfast, no showers, no cup of coffee this morning. So these are students I meet with regularly. I sit down, I say, how can I help? And they say, I need shelter. And so here we are in October. The weather is rapidly changing, and we need a plan. We need a winter strategy for these students. So that's my appeal.
Thank you so much for your public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, Rich Self, you here? Okay, can you please come forward and welcome Mr. Self. We'll be happy to give you 3 minutes of public comment after you tell us your name and where you live. Welcome.
Welcome, and thank you for having this opportunity with a public forum. I'm Richard Self. I live downtown. I don't even know my ward, but I try and represent Ward 9, so it's in my heart. Thank you to the folks that are the first responders. I know a lot of folks in the South Hills that I go to my church and so forth were impacted and all that by that. I think the county and the city might consider underground electrical wiring and cables in the future, at least in those areas, instead of overhead, might alleviate some of these issues in the future. Now to other subjects that were started by the previous speaker. The healthcare providers, 3 healthcare providers, donated $2.7 million to start the construction on the Commons that I know you guys talked about, and that's to be thankful for. Imagine what would happen should you use the word healthcare in your homeless emergency declaration, as in homeless healthcare emergency. These folks are waiting to do just what they did with that to help alleviate the situation as far as financial contributions. They've done it elsewhere. They could do it here. I urge the county in my short 3 minutes here to possibly create a tax on empty structures that have been left vacant by the owners for beyond a reasonable time. This has been done in other municipalities across the country and even in Finland, and it works to urge owners to either do something or opt out, and maybe this would open up areas for other day centers, navigation centers, low barrier shelters, as recommended by the TAC. And while we wait for such things, I would encourage the county to partner with the city to use vacant lots in both Eugene and Springfield for legally sanctioned camping. This would alleviate and coincide with even the TAC recommendations that advise strongly against criminalizing homeless camping on public property when no other alternatives are available. This would create some alternatives, and the county and the city could work out how we could do this, and with volunteers and so forth. But the portable showers that the firefighters used, those are accessible, I believe, and could be mobilized to serve the homeless. And I think that's an idea. There's one in Portland, somebody mobilized an RV that 4 shower stalls and a laundry travels around. It's a great idea. And again, no renter paying rent within reason should be paying more than 30% of their income in rent. I thank you again for having this forum so open to participate and comment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that has not been, was not signed up for public comment? Okay. So with that, we'll move on to commissioner responses to public comment. Commissioner Buck.
Ms. Morgan, I just wanted to thank you for sharing your personal story, especially at the end of your talk there. I know that people go through this. It's very different to hear it firsthand from you, and knowing that you still work every day to make those changes in your life or recover from the changes that you've had to make in order to move on. And it's very powerful. So thank you for sharing. I also wanted to thank Ms. Daly and Ms. Yates for coming in to talk about homeless youth. And thank you for bringing your beautiful baby. I love it when we see kids here. I've been thinking about our homeless youth for quite some time now. And we have so few shelters for them. And we know that if we aren't able to come together and reach them and help them and shelter them where they are right now, that they'll become part of our population of homeless adults and continue to utilize those social services on a routine basis and may be cyclical and never be able to get out. And I really, really want to see more youth shelters in our community, all throughout our community, to make sure that not one single youth is unsheltered. I think it's wholly unacceptable to have that in our community, and whatever I can do to help support that, I will do. So thank you for continuing to bring that subject forward.
Okay, other commissioners want to make any comments? Commissioner Farr.
Before my comment, a quick question, Mr. Chair. Which item is being pulled from the consent calendar? Is that the one regarding?
That's the one on the, we're having Mr. Kyler come down, and we're going to be talking about in the matter of advocating for a statewide addiction recovery continuum of care. Commissioner Bozovich asked to be pulled off the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then I'll reserve my comments in general for that discussion, but thank you for being here today, and thank you for your testimony. To Ms. Daly and Ms. Yates, thanks for being here. You know, when I was the executive director of Food for Lane County, I would frequently have roundtables where we try to address the specific needs of people who were, with Food for Lane County, hungry. But people who are hungry quite often have other issues, such as inadequate housing, homelessness. And I remember one conversation stood out really starkly to me, and it was during the month of December. And a young woman came in front of the panel that we were inviting youth to talk, and she said that one of the hardest things for her was to walk by a window and look inside the window and see people warm and enjoying hot meals when she had neither. And that, while I tried to be empathetic throughout my life, that really rung true to me. I can still see the eyes and the face of this young lady who very poignantly, and I use that word, that's not an adequate word. I mean, who she really, from her heart, talked about what it was like to see people who have when they have not. Your call for winter strategies surrounding homeless youth is heard. It rings like a clear bell, and believe me, the Poverty and Homelessness Board, as you know, is working on it. But beyond that, Lane County Human Services is working on plans, inadequate though they may be, though they always have been. We continue to work and continue to seek ways to find shelter for the 18 to 24-year-olds who quite often fall through a crack in the boards. You know, kids younger than 18 often have services that kids who are 18 to 24 don't have. So thanks for being here. Thanks for elevating my attention even further, for elevating everybody's attention toward it. Thank you.
Okay, the comments by commissioners. Commissioner Burney.
First of all, Terry Morgan, I don't know if you recall, but when we first met, you said you'd never spoken to a public official, elected official before. And I said, I'd never been an elected official before. And we began our conversation. I think for someone that is new at that, you guys are doing a fascinating job, and I look forward to the next discussion on that. Is it Ms. Daly and Gates, is that correct? Thank you. I want to say, as someone that, can you hear me? As someone that, that in the 70s worked under the Carter administration in an agency called the Community Services Administration, which is now defunct, which was part of Johnson's war on poverty, and had the opportunity to work in 42 different barrios, ghettos, and reservations across the country. I find at this age, some 40 years later, I want to move beyond the empathy that we hear from people about how bad this is and how much we're trying. And I know it's bad, and I know we're trying. And I just want to talk about solutions. I just want to talk about how do we make things happen. I think now is way too late to be talking about winter strategies. And I think we will see a movement on this commission to begin talking about that earlier. I have learned, sadly, publicly, through Commissioner Farr, how much work actually is being done, and it's very important to identify that. By the same token, I want to reiterate that and this speaks to something that another gentleman spoke of, that not only have I asked staff, but now I offer to help staff inventory, because these inventories exist, all vacant buildings, all vacant warehouses, all vacancies in the county, in different cities, and take a look at the highest and best use for vacant structures. Might not be able to do anything right now, but I think as long as we get a plan in place, there's going to be no other way to begin to move on what Commissioner Buck and you, I think, have identified as just the needs to diversify locations of shelter. One of the questions I would ask you, you don't have to answer right now, but as I'm grappling with, is what kind of a shelter, what would a shelter system look like, and how would we pay for it, so that this is not an issue? And finally, I would like to say that my first meeting, which was the last presentation of the TAC report to a combined meeting of the Eugene City Council and Lane County Board of Commissioners that I was new at, I still feel new at it. They did not include in their count the homeless youth numbers that the various school districts in Lane County were reporting as young people who were homeless. And at that time, and I've learned, I can't keep saying that. I understand we need to be on the same page, and we are, and we're moving forward. But at that time, my point was, if your underlying data and assumptions are incorrect, then that might not inform the best plan. So as you bring this to our attention, we individually and as a group will move, accommodate, need to be flexible, because there are so many homeless young people. And thank you all so much. I really believe in this public comment and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to thank the people that came in for public comment, touching on two subjects that are very important to me. I think if people heard me speak about our winter strategies, my concern was the homeless youth and the fact that that's a number we could actually deal with. We're not going to, with our current level of resources, we're not going to house 2,000 people, and particularly adults, but we could, with our current level of resources, house 100 youth. So I think that needs to be and I believe in taking action rather than declaring intentions. It's one of the reasons, and I don't advertise this much, but my wife and I give only to two charities. We give to Looking Glass, and we give to the Lamb family. That's it, because that's where we feel the need is, and that's what we want to do with our resources. So with that, I know I'm probably not going to make some people happy about the item that I pulled from the agenda, but it is about that difference between declaring good intentions and taking actions on those intentions.
Thank you very much. Let me just say a few things. First of all, Ms. Morgan, thanks so much for your persistence. You emailed me. I gave you some ideas of how to get this resolution up, and today's the big day. So thank you so much for your perseverance. And as was mentioned, also your personal story of of being addicted, of getting help, fighting for that help despite the obstacles, and still really being an addict that continues to deal with that, but is overcoming it. It's a really great story and really appeals to, I think, all those young people that you're going to talk to, because it's one thing for, I mean, as inspiring as it is for some people to hear from a heterosexual white lawyer, as inspiring that is to some people, it's not that inspiring to other people. And so I think it's really important that you keep telling your story. As for the homeless youth, you know, this is something that's really heartbreaking when you think about it. And I was trying to do the arithmetic, and I didn't do a great job, but somewhere between 5 and 10% then of the homeless point in time count were people under the age of 18 or 24 or something like that. So, you know, that means that on top of the 2,000 people that are homeless in the official government point in time count, that 5 to 10% of them are kids. Well, how horrible is that as a statement of our county? And, you know, money is not the root of all evil. It is the pursuit of money exclusively that is the root of much evil. And so, in my view, with the federal government pretty much unable to and maybe unwilling to provide additional funding to solve this problem, and with the state unable or unwilling to provide additional money to solve this problem, it comes on the local officials to try to figure that out. Now, we have collectively, and this is a we, meaning many different elected officials and boards of commissioners, we've authorized public votes for taxes for jail and youth detention twice. We have authorized a public vote for public money to go into a courthouse. We've authorized a public vote for transportation. And we've authorized at least one and maybe two votes for the extension service. Some of those passed, some of them didn't pass, but that's what the board has done. But the board has not put out a public vote on housing, affordable housing, homelessness, youth homelessness, or other ways of asking the public if they're willing to dig into their pocket to help solve these problems. And I would say that that the efforts that the city government, county government, and other local governments have made have been rather significant. There's a lot of money, and our chief budget officer that the board appoints each year is our county administrator. And we had a wonderful overview the last time someone came in to talk about what we weren't doing. We had a good response, I think, to all of the work that our budget committee, our administration has put into this. Having said that, we have not put a public vote out to ask for the public's help in helping us further in these items. So that's something that's on my plate. I hope we would consider the polling that it would take to ask people ahead of time what would they be willing to, how much would they be willing to go into their pocketbook, and how many $4 cups of coffee are they willing to give up per month, if that's what it comes down to try to help their friends and neighbors, and in this case, their friends and neighbors' children. So just something to keep in mind. And we currently have an effort out there with a contract we're doing with Better Housing Together. They will be reporting back to us in December with a work plan. They will be telling us about public engagement in, I believe, February or January, February. So there will be ongoing efforts where your point of view will be welcome. And then maybe in the spring, we will have a report back from them on some recommended actions. Thank you one and all for coming in for public comment. And I want to just mention briefly that we do have 2 more public comments, one 9 o'clock next Tuesday, and we also have public comment in our evening session on Tuesday, October 15 at 5:30 p.m. here at Harris Hall. So with that, I'd like to move to item number 6, our consent calendar. And this will be a consent calendar motion to approve all of the consent calendar except for item B, 6B3. So this is all of it but the continuum of care, statewide addiction, continuum of care items. So with that, I'll turn to a commissioner who can make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve the consent calendar as presented minus item 6B3. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, so now we can move to item 6B3, which is order and resolution 19-10-08-03 in the matter of advocating for a statewide addiction recovery continuum of care. And Commissioner Bozevich asked to have this voted separately. So Commissioner, I'll turn it over to you.
If you want to have somebody make a motion and second it, I'll speak to the motion at that time about why I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote.
Okay, so I'll call on a commissioner who wishes to make a motion to approve the order and resolution as presented.
So moved?
Second.
Sorry.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Burney, seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve order and resolution 19-10-08-03 as presented. Commissioner Bozevich.
Thank you. So similar to my vote on the declaration of a homeless emergency, I'm going to be voting against this resolution, partly because there is a cost to passing resolutions. Almost 10 years ago, when I brought this to the board's attention, the minimum cost was $800 to bring a resolution before the board. I know that staff had to work back and forth with the Oregon Recovers folks, and therefore this one's probably more than that. Resources that could have been spent on the actual problem versus declaring our good intentions about the problem. I have a family that the addiction gene runs strong in. My father was a functional alcoholic who didn't get into recovery until he went into detox after an emergency bypass in his old age. My brother's currently in recovery. I just lost a brother recently who had issues with addiction. And I'm greatly concerned about this problem. But, the governor passed, an executive order back in May, and she just declared that she's not going to do anything about that executive order for another 18 months. So just declaring good intentions doesn't get anything done. In fact, at her recommendation in the budget, they cut back on community corrections funding, one of the places we fund emergence, and some of our treatment programs for those folks that are involved in the criminal justice system. So really, this ought to be something that's really just being referred to legislative committee so we can actually work on real legislation to make changes versus just declaring our good intentions. So with that, I'm going to be voting against this resolution, as I will any other declarations, resolutions, or whatever that do not have the meaning of action or carry any force with them, that are only declaring our good intentions because they waste the resources we could be using to solve the problems those good intentions are being asked, to be supported. So I'm going to be voting no on this.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
You know, while Commissioner Bozovich's words are clear and consistent, I have a slightly different take on this, on resolutions. I've been in and around resolutions for a long time. And a resolution can also highlight and bring people's attention to ongoing work that is occurring within the organization that makes a resolution, that stands behind a resolution. And I'm looking right at you, Ms. Gaffney, and I think about our Health and Human Services Department. We have a mental health advisory, local drug and alcohol planning committee that takes action on a regular basis surrounding addiction and surrounding local efforts toward addiction. We also have a public health advisory committee that the same thing, addresses addiction and addresses programs surrounding addiction and makes recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners. You have a health department that continually works on addictions. I sat last week on a panel with you, with Dr. Ludke, Dr. Kincaid, and Dr. Jenny from the state, and Senator Wyden, talking about addiction. We continually work on addiction. So a resolution of this kind, if it's worded ever so slightly differently, can, in addition to outline how interested we are in continuing, in looking for new work, how interested we also are in highlighting the work that's already been done. And so I'm in favor of this resolution, but much like the resolution regarding a homelessness emergency, I'd like to propose a slight amendment to it, and that is to add an additional whereas, and it would be whereas Lane County is committed to the ongoing work surrounding addiction through its mental health advisory local drug and alcohol planning committee, not policy committee, but planning committee. And it's the state is a policy commission. We have a planning committee. Through the local drug and alcohol planning committee and its public health advisory committee are addressing addiction and continue to focus on programs surrounding addiction. And I have the exact, if I'd like to propose that as a friendly amendment. If I get a second and approval of that amendment, I have the exact wording for staff.
Okay, so I'll ask Commissioner Burney, the maker of the motion. Is that acceptable?
You're asking me?
Yeah, you're the maker of the motion. He wants a friendly amendment. So if it's friendly, you'll say yes. If it's not so friendly, you'll say no, and then we'll have a motion to amend the main motion.
I would not know if that was friendly or not until I asked Oregon Recovers whether they felt that was friendly or not. I'm sorry, but it's hard for me to speak for other people.
That's reasonable. This is a word crafting, wordsmithing on the fly, but it's words I've thought about a great deal.
So if there's no motion to amend, then we'll go on to the main motion.
Mr. Chair, I would then move to amend to add the whereas that I just stated, and I have the exact wording for staff. I have the motion to amend, which includes Lane County's ongoing work on addiction programs.
May I say something here? I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
Yeah, go ahead. But first, we have to have a second before we can debate that.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Buck to amend the main motion. And Commissioner Burney.
This is like, if in fact this board approved the resolution, which at this moment I have no idea what will occur, I would be more comfortable then having this brought up as an amendment to the motion, maybe at our next meeting after discussion with the Oregon Recovers Group, simply to check whether that works for them or not. That's my only point. I'm not against it at all. And in fact, when we talk about the motion, I will point out that, like Commissioner Bozovich, I also emailed and said, I think I want to pull this from the consent calendar, and my reason was fundamentally different. It was to make sure that staff had worked with you guys and that, in fact, you supported this. And I was assured via email that a lot of hard work has gone into this, that it's been coordinated with you, that you support it, and your testimony during public testimony indicated the same. So I said, oh, well, then I don't want to pull it. So it's the same thing. I just want to make sure we're speaking with before, not before we speak for.
Okay, anything further on the amended motion?
I just wanted to ask Alex, thoughts on the amendment and how you would be able to utilize this type of resolution in upcoming legislation.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Buck. I find the language suggested by Commissioner Farr to be highly appropriate. I mean, that is the committee that he speaks to is a mandated committee that every county has. I present to them regularly. They meet regularly. This is squarely in their wheelhouse, and I think it's very consistent with the final, now therefore, the actual resolution part of this resolution, which is that we'll continue to work on an entire continuum of care, which is really what Oregon Recovers and the Oregon Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission are working towards, I mean, the work in the legislature to form the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission is it's a significant departure from past practice, and in no small part is thanks to Oregon Recover's work on that issue several years ago that was hand in hand with the governor's declaration of a public health crisis at the time. And I think, you know, it's going to take a little bit of time, but there is a mandate under state law for the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission to actually create a framework. This board commented on the framework plan in a formal letter that was brought in front of actually this board and sent to the commission. I got a response from them for very thoughtful testimony that we provided in written form. So I mean, listening to Commissioner Farr speak to his point, I'm kind of kicking myself for not getting that in here in the first place because it is an existing structure that Lane County has.
Okay, let me just say, I really think that this does add to the resolution because it recognizes that we do have an appropriate process within the county government, including our committee that reports to us and is integrally involved with state legislative activity. So I really don't have a problem, and it actually strengthens and improves your resolution. So further comments, Commissioner Burney?
I want to thank Commissioner Farr. Then, as I learn publicly again, thank Commissioner Buck for asking the question. Thank Mr. Kyler and move the question.
Okay, so the question's been called, so we're going to first vote on whether to cut off the debate. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And now we'll move to the amended motion. All those in favor of the amended motion, adding the language about the committee, say aye.
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 Vote if, those opposed, vote no. Motion carries 5-0. And we're now,
For one abstention, I did not vote.
okay, you did not
I'm not going
vote.
to vote on an amendment to a motion I plan on voting against.
Okay, so the vote was 4 yes. Commissioners Farr, Buck, Sorensen, and Burney voting aye. Commissioner Bozovich not voting. And now we'll go to the main motion approving the resolution with the change, with the additional. Further discussion. I just want to say thank you so much for coming in, not only coming in, but also your commitment to continuing to advocate for heightening this issue. I think these resolutions have a lot of benefit. One is that it can inspire people to act. They can hear this. They can hear about Commissioner Bozovich's commitment to the issue, the family stories of how people have been harmed, even killed by addiction. I think it also allows for legitimate debate about whether something is or is not an emergency, is or is not urgent, is or is not important. It also can educate the advocates. You've probably been educated through this process to some extent, educate people on the obstacles that we are facing in terms of federal funding, state funding, local funding, how all this goes together, who does what committees do what, and yet you're persevering and learning more and keep pushing it. It also helps the board in understanding, because we come in sometimes and we've been told nothing's happening on this, and sometimes we repeat that, and then we are educated ourselves about the valiant efforts that are going on that maybe we didn't have as much knowledge on. So I think this is really great. I'm sorry that it's taken this long, but these things, that's another educational component. These things take a while, and we have to make sure that we are consistent with all the other things we've said as best we can, and coordinate with our legislative committee, our mental health committee, and the staff that works on both of those things, which is very involved in this issue. And I just hope that as a result of all this, some good happens, some good happens. And I'm optimistic that taking the time to do this and being responsive to constituents that come in with legitimate concerns is a good thing. So thanks for coming in. Any further comments before we go to our vote? Commissioner Burney.
Yes, I believe that Terry's not here. Was her?
No, she's over there.
Forgive my lack of, Did you say that Oregon has the 4th highest addiction rate in the nation and the 50th, what was that? The 50th with least accessible recovery services? I would like to say that in my humble opinion, there are resolutions and there are resolutions. And so I don't have the benefit of advancing one doctrine to look at all resolutions. I am in absolute and complete alignment with the intent behind Commissioner Bozovic's remarks. And that's why he and I find ourselves, interestingly, in agreeing with one another on a variety of things. On the money thing, it seems to me the work here has already been done. So the work's been done. And in this particular instance, I think that this is yet another example of one of the kindest, pragmatic, real things that we could do to help you advance your work on behalf not of yourselves, but the people that you serve, who are our friends and neighbors. So I also agree with Commissioner Farr in terms of, in this instance, it's an ability to help you focus attention, I would imagine, and try and generate more public will and resource for this group. And that's why I'm much appreciative of the work of Mr. Kyler also. So that's why I'm going to vote for this particular resolution.
Okay, all those in favor of the resolution as presented and amended, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Vote carries 4-1. Commissioners Farr, Buck, Sorensen, and Burney voting aye. Commissioner Bozovich voting no. And the order is adopted. Thank you very much to all involved. And we are now ready to go into our election security item. That is item 8B, as in boy. Work session, update on Lane County election security. Cheryl Betchard, Lane County Clerk, is here. Welcome, Ms. Betchard. And I see other folks in the audience that are here for this item. We set this up, item 8B, as a 10-minute presentation by you, Ms. Betchard, and then a 20-minute period for questions and comments for commissioners. And so without further ado, welcome. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. So I've been asked to provide a general overview of Lane County's election security, and I'm happy to bring this before you today. This is going to include what we can do at the local level to secure elections. Please be aware that some of the information that I am providing will be very general because for security reasons, we're not able to give those specific details out. So please keep that in mind when we do have the follow-up for questions. Once I'm done, obviously we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions and follow up on what I've provided. So as the county clerk, one of my top responsibilities, I believe, is to protect and ensure the integrity of the county elections process. There's several things that we currently do at this time and have been for a number of years. I've been in the county clerk's position now for nearly 10 years, and prior to that was the supervisor in elections for another 8 years, as well as worked with the state through many different developments in their statewide system. So my experience and knowledge has covered a wide variety of things. So the security is a new area that there's considerable focus on right now. One of the things that we do is we file annually a security plan with the Secretary of State's office. This is required by statute, and it includes a variety of areas that the state asks us to cover in specific detail. So that is submitted in January of every year, and our plan has been approved ever since the statute was adopted. So happy to say we're passing every year. I wanted to spend some time telling you about our ballot tabulation system, and that is something that is pretty exciting, a lot of things happening, and I feel very confident about it. We use the Clear Ballot tabulation system, equipment, and software. We are one of 15 counties in Oregon that have used the Clear Ballot system. With your approval, we put this in place in November of 2016, and the Clear Ballot system is a very transparent system that we utilize, and it covers about 70% of the voters in Oregon that would be voting with the Clear Ballot system and software process. All of our voting systems, the machines and programs used to count ballots have been certified by a federally accredited voting system test laboratory and have gone through rigorous analysis to ensure that it is secure. In addition to that, Oregon has their own certification process, and that is also a process that will happen anytime something is updated or adopted here in Oregon. So two very different processes for the security of the tabulation equipment. It's a closed system, so it's not connected to the internet in any way. Oregon uses paper ballots. We are a vote-by-mail state, obviously, and we have that paper trail, and that's something that's very important through all of our processes. Each election has to be balanced, and what that means is that when you vote your ballot, we keep track of the number of ballots that have come in, and we have to balance them against the number of votes that are cast. And we fill out a balancing report that is submitted to the Secretary of State's office at the conclusion of every election and just before I certify the election 20 days after the election day. So that's something else in statute that is required. Prior to any ballots being counted, we also test our voting system at 3 separate times before the election. We also test again after the election and at the time of certification. And this is where we're testing all of the ballot styles that we have for the election, all the different combinations based on the number of candidates, the number of measures. It's a complete process that we do, and there's thousands of ballots that are tested depending on the size of the election to ensure that the expected outcome is as we expect it to be. So that happens 3 times before the election, 1 time after the election to make sure everything is as we expect them to be. After a general election, which is your November of the even-numbered years, we also do an additional test, and that is an audit of randomly sampled ballots. And the state we provide to the Secretary of State what our precinct numbers are or our batch numbers, and they will give us the number of batches or precincts that they want us to hand audit. And this is human beings coming in and randomly we pull those ballots and they'll randomly verify that they were counted correctly as the voter intended. So that happens after a general election, and then we provide a report to the Secretary of State on that auditing outcome. And again, our county has passed all audits in the past since that law was implemented. With the recent law change beginning in November of 2020, there will be a random audit conducted after every election that is conducted in Oregon. So all the special elections, primaries, recall election, any election, we will now do a hand audit where human beings will come in and they will recheck again what has been done for the election, a sample of that. So that's something new that'll be coming in the future. All ballots are counted in a secure room at the elections office, and we do have security cameras in place wherever ballots are processed. And in addition to that, all the ballot processing tasks that we perform are conducted at a minimum by 2 people of different political party affiliation. So anytime we have ballots, we will have at least 2 people present in the building for the specific task. So we work very hard to keep that in place. Often if you're coming in our office and you're in a secure area, you may hear somebody say, what's your political party? And we check and validate that to make sure that we comply with that requirement in our building. In addition to our ballot tabulation system, we also have a statewide centralized voter registration system, and that is, we often refer to that as OCVR, and that is the voter registration system that is used by all of the 36 counties here in Oregon. And each day, a copy of that voter registration file is saved at the state level so that they always have a current record of the voter registration for that day. The state is also implementing a 2-factor authentication process that they'll be putting in place for, I believe it's going to happen early next year. We all have passwords and are authorized to go into the Oregon state, the statewide system, but the 2-factor authentication process is something new which will give a higher level of security for accessing the voter registration OCVR system that we use in all counties. And then in addition to that, there is a statewide election night reporting system. And this is something that's provided by the Secretary of State's office. And they provide a secure upload platform for us to transfer data on election night when we release results. We also track locally what our results are for the county. So we report our Lane County results, and in addition, we also transmit the results through that secure location to the state. So if there's a measure or a contest that is outside of Lane County, the voters, anyone can see what those results are statewide, instead of how we had to do it in the past. You'd have to go to 36 counties and try to add them all up. This is a method that we have available now that the state has offered to us that we utilize. A couple challenges I wanted to mention to you. The state elections division and all of the county clerks have identified our biggest challenge for election security is misinformation. There's a lot of information that's out there right now, nationally, statewide, and possibly even countywide. That's something of a great concern to us, and we are partnering with the Secretary of State to address that type of misinformation, how we can manage what people see on social media, and that all impacts possibly the secure aspect of conducting elections. So that's something that the state and the counties are actively working to address as we go into next year. In addition, our second biggest challenge is resource limitations. We have very experienced staff at elections currently, but we are anticipating at least 3 full-time staff will be retiring next year, which means that loss of experience and knowledge will impact us. So we're certainly cognizant and aware for planning so that we can address that shortfall, which will be happening during, obviously, a very key election year for us. But we certainly wish them well in their retirements. Those staff have been with us a long time. So we continue to have a challenge to bring in the right experience to be able to just identify and plan and resolve possible challenges like this ongoing. But it is something that we actively do statewide, and I'm part of that effort to ensure that the security of everything that we do is conducted in the utmost integrity. A couple other things that we're doing ongoing to address security for future elections. Just this year, we participated in 2 cybersecurity tabletop exercises that were conducted. One was Oregon, as well as 44 other states, attended a tabletop exercise in Salem, where we were given possible threats and talked about resolution of those threats. In addition to that, we had a tabletop exercise that the Secretary of State's office coordinated at our county clerk's conference in August. And this one was amazing because we actually talked about specific vote by mail threats and what could happen. And since Oregon is all vote by mail, it was a great opportunity to talk about those types of security threats and what things we needed to do to remedy or resolve the impact of those threats to us. So that's something that's already happened. But other things that we're doing actively, we participate in a monthly call and a webinar with MS-ISAC, which is the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We're a member of that group, as well as some of the TS staff here at the county that monitor those announcements and participate in those calls. We also participate in the quarterly call for EI-ISAC, which is the Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And this was something that was put in place specifically for election security. And it's something that we are a member of since last year when it was actually started. We receive ongoing bulletins and emails and different avenues where we find out about security threats, whether it's at the local level, the statewide level, or nationally, so we are in tune to what's happening. This group has also provided election day security in case there was anything in Oregon happening. This initially was made for statewide elections, but they have also allowed us to participate for local elections. So May of this year, where this group wouldn't have been looking at possible security threats, they were actively engaged in Oregon's elections so that if something came up, we could address it at that time. So it's 2 things that we're doing. I also meet monthly with the Technology Services Cybersecurity Manager here at the county. We've been meeting for a couple months now and plan on doing this ongoing so that we can talk about what's happening in Oregon, what are possible items locally that we need to address. So those are some things that we're currently doing, as well as continuing our partnership with the Secretary of State. The Elections Division is very aware of the challenges that we all have with misinformation and election security. They have put together a ballot security page on their website at OregonVotes.gov. We have something on our local website here in Lane County as well, and it has updates and activities that are happening at those levels that are helpful as we all deal with election security. We are also having a facility assessment that the Sheriff's Office is going to be conducted. This is similar to what they do where they'll come into a facility and they will assess the security of your building and give you recommendations of things to improve as you head into a busy election year. So we're having, that assessment is coming up here this month. And then in addition to that, the Department of Homeland Security is doing security assessments in all the Oregon counties. They've finished about 10 or 11 currently. They'll all be completed by the end of February next year. And the last that will be done are the I-5 corridor counties because they're saving us for the winter season and getting the eastern counties done first. But that assessment will be happening by February. The couple counties that I've spoken with that have already had the assessment have had very good response as far as recommendations, and they're actively working to get implementation for those types of recommendations for that security assessment. So with that, we're going to take a few minutes and watch an election video that Devin and I had worked to prepare for the 2018 election, and we'll be putting in some changes to this in place for the 2020 election. So she's going to cue that up, and we'll watch that for just a minute.
While you're doing that, what election are you working on right now? What is the election that ends in November?
Yes, Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, we are working on an election that involves about 123,000 voters, City of Eugene, City of Coburg, and Santa Clara Fire District.
Oregon and Lane County have a proud history of ensuring open, accessible, and accountable elections. Our election staff ensure that hundreds of thousands of Lane County voters receive and are able to easily return their ballots during each election. Our elections team ensures that each vote is counted accurately. Our elections manager, Cheryl, will give you a glimpse behind the scenes so you can see how your ballot is processed and how your vote gets counted.
At Lane County Elections, we work hard to uphold the democratic process and ensure that every voter's ballot is counted. So, what happens once voters drop off or mail their ballots? Let's take a closer look at how Lane County Elections processes and secures your vote. Ballots are collected at our drop boxes, arrive in the mail, or are dropped off at our office. Once they arrive at our elections office, ballots are run through a high-speed sorter, which captures the unique return information, including the signature on the return envelope. This helps us track which voters have returned their ballots. After being sorted, an election worker who is trained in signature verification compares the signature on the back of the ballot return envelope to the signature on the voter's registration record. If the signature does not match, the voter is notified and given instructions on how to remedy the discrepancy. Every signature for every ballot is verified.
I apologize.
And must match. Only after the return envelope is scanned and the signature verified do we open the envelope. In order to maintain the secrecy of each ballot, the envelopes are opened and the secrecy envelopes are separated from the return envelopes by an official elections board. That includes mixed political party membership. After the secrecy envelopes are separated, the election board removes the actual ballot from the secrecy envelope. At this point, there is no identifying information on the ballot, and we cannot connect the ballot to an individual voter. The ballots are inspected by the election board to make sure they will be readable by the state-certified tabulating equipment. That equipment is a closed and secure system and is not connected to a network to ensure the security of the process. Oregon law allows us to begin scanning up to 7 days prior to the election. However, we are prohibited from sharing preliminary results. The tally is uploaded to a secure site managed by the Oregon Secretary of State's office, and the state begins releasing statewide and local counts beginning at 8 p.m. on Election Day. We also begin placing local Lane County results on our website at 8 p.m. on Election Day. From start to finish, each ballot is handled with the utmost care. Lane County Elections takes great pride in ensuring every voter in Lane County has access to an open and accountable elections process.
From our small year-round team to the extra help employees who assist during each election, we take great pride in our work to support democracy in action here in Lane County. For more information about elections in Lane County, visit lanecounty.org/elections.
So as I mentioned, ensuring the integrity and security of the whole election process is really important to me and to our voters. And that concludes my presentation, so I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. Okay.
Okay, do commissioners have questions as we start this out? And then we'll continue after lunch, but any commissioners? Commissioner Buck?
You had mentioned that you had a session where you were talking about specifically vote-by-mail threats. What are those? Are you able to discuss that?
Which ones work the best?
Actually, Oregon is, I believe, the best state in the country for security. And there are obviously potential items that we have to address as we conduct the elections, but we are in very good shape. And anything that's happened as far as what you've been hearing across the country, Oregon has been clean. We have had no hacks or into the statewide system. And we have been working with our partners at the state and local level to address any potential things, but so far, Oregon has not had anything that has caused concern. Are there attempts? Yes, there are always attempts, but Oregon has been very clean and is really a model across the country for vote by mail. And others are come to us and ask us, what are you doing? What is going right? And things are going well for us, but it doesn't mean that you aren't continually looking at possibilities from the minute the ballots come in to drop boxes to whatever. We look at possible scenarios, and those are our discussion items to potentially deal with in the future.
Okay, Commissioner Farr?
Ms. Badger, I got to watch the election process happening. Some of the volunteers sorting the envelopes. It's like poetry watching that happen in a certain way. But I have a question I'm very curious about. In 2002, I was elected to the House of Representatives from a newly formed district after a redistricting. At the same time, the redistricting created a district that included the University of Oregon and, for instance, Shedd and Mackenzie Bridge, different counties in the same election. How does that work? Is that a fairly simple process where you have different counties electing in the same district? And I mean, that district wraps all the way around Springfield, all the way around Eugene and Harrisburg, and grabs Shedd. That seems pretty confusing to me.
So all of the districts are set up based on your residential address. So if there is a district that extends outside of our county, then that county will report for their district, or their county, and will report for ours. And then those results will get consolidated so that you have the total, which is for those statewide positions.
So even a district that is really twisted and tweaked like that one had been, it's easy for the counties to reconcile that.
That's correct. And it's actually now with the statewide election night reporting tool, it is even easier for voters to actually see those accumulated results that are, it's happening in multiple counties. We have, I think, 4 counties that we have districts that extend into, and some that extend into our county. It could even be a school district. So we do have to keep track of that at the county level, and then they'll be consolidated. So even for a school district, which 4J has a small area that goes into another county, we record, one county would report into our county because we're the primary district. We would have the summation of those 2 counties and report it to the district based on those addresses.
Right on. And while my district was weird, it had downtown Eugene and Cheshire, for instance. It was all in one county. But good, that gives me a confidence that something wasn't created that made it difficult for counties to remain secure. Thank you.
Okay, so how do the commissioners feel about taking more comments, or should we recess till 1:30? How do you feel?
I have a lunch engagement, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree.
Okay, it's going to take more than, we're going to go into the lunch hour if we go, because we will take more. We have.
The question is whether Ms. Betchart's available at 1:30.
Yes, she is. Okay, Commissioner Bozovich, go ahead.
Okay. So, first I just want to commend you and Oregon in general on the integrity of the ballot count machines and how they're separated from the internet. I do believe once ballots are collected and are in the count process, we have one of the most secure systems in the country, I think, absolutely. There are 2 places where I have concern, and one's before we ever get the ballot, and the other one's in the signature verification process. But before we ever get the ballots, we don't require photo ID with registration, and we depend on signing something that says you're liable to up to a $10,000 fine if you falsify information on your registration. Yet I know of no ever action in Lane County to go after somebody for falsifying their registration information. The other part of that is then, we have this whole thing with mailing, and we're doing vote by mail now. Motor voter, where we're registering a lot of young people at a time in their lives where they change address constantly. So there's quite often ballots being mailed to inaccurate addresses. And I witnessed this myself doing doors. I'm sure any of the other commissioners that did doors during their elections, you have a list from elections about what voters are supposed to be at a house. You knock on the door and ask for that voter, and you find out they haven't lived there for a year, you know? is not an unusual thing. So that whole issue about mailing, and then the issue of the fact that we no longer have the privacy of a voting booth. You know, the spouse that is under pressure from the other spouse to vote a certain way when they open their ballots together and vote together at the kitchen table. You know, how do we address that part and that upfront security in the election process? And I'll probably wait till after 1:30 to go ahead into the signature verification. But that upfront, before the ballots are collected, is a real concern for me. Are we getting accurate registrations? Are ballots being mailed to people that shouldn't get them, and could they possibly getting back in through the system? Is there possibility of interference and pressure from family members or household members to vote ballots certain ways before you ever sign your ballot, envelope? So how do we deal with those threats to our election system?
So Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Bosevich, Commissioners, so those are all really good points. Those are things that we are actively looking at all of the time. So let me address the accuracy of the voter registration system. So we receive on a monthly basis the national change of address from the post office. And that comes in to the Secretary of State's office. They pass that down to all the 36 counties. So if you've given a change of address to the post office, which most people do, that when they move, then we receive that information and update your record before you probably even know that we did. In fact, I just had somebody from the county come in this morning, one of the facilities gentlemen, and said he needed to update his registration. I said, well, let's look and see. And he said, well, no, we just moved a space number. And I said, well, let's just check. We'd already got the information and updated it. So we also receive updates from the Secretary of State's for all of the DMV. So if somebody changes at the DMV, we receive that information. That comes in on a daily basis. So anything that the DMV is received, we also receive by law. In addition, we receive cancellation information from Vital Records, from our local county facilities, so that anytime there's been a death, we do have that information and we update our rolls to reflect that. I would say that we are, and I am extremely proud of the fact that our record is what I would call very clean. We work extremely hard to keep the data current so that ballots do go out to just those people that are eligible. What would happen if somebody has moved? I mean, if somebody dies and they're out of the state, there is a delay in us receiving that information, for example. Nothing is going to be at the minute you move, the minute we're going to get it. If ballots have already been pulled, like after lunch, we're pulling the election information for our inserting, then people are going to be changing as early as tomorrow. Once we update your information, we will inactivate the ballot that you have. So even if the neighbor received it, if we received something the next day, that the evidence that something has been changed and we've updated that address, the first ballot that has been sent to them is inactivated. You can only have one active ballot by a person. In addition to that, we are one of, I think we're up to about 19 states where we share data with joint states across the country, and we receive on a monthly basis electronically information if they register in another state. And that state will notify us, and then we will take them off of our rolls. And that's something that we've been involved in for a number of years now. And that information keeps our rolls current as well. So I think we are doing everything we can. Is it perfect? No. Is there a possibility that somebody could get a ballot and vote it and doesn't live there? Yes, that can happen. But we certainly do feel that, signing that signature hopefully will give people pause. But I do think our rolls are very, very current, and we're doing as much as we can to ensure that information. And those are some of the things that we're doing to keep those records current.
But we'll just recess till 1:30, and we'll pick up with you and Commissioner Bozievich. Then we'll have the other commissioners ask questions as well. Thank you. We're in recess till 1:30.